Welcome back to Close Up. He's the mayor of the financial and cultural capital of the United States. But while New York City has twice elected Bill de Blasio, he's still looking for that breakout moment in a very crowded Democratic presidential primary. Mayor de Blasio, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Adam.
We appreciate your time. So a certain former constituent is the President of the United States, yes. Donald Trump. Even by his standards, this last week was impressive in terms of the news cycle, trying to buy Greenland, referring to American Jews as disloyal if they vote for Democrats, and referring to himself, I believe, as the chosen one on the issue of trade. So if you are the nominee running against Donald Trump, how do you deal with the tornado of headlines that he is able to produce that can often change the conversation very quickly?
Yeah, Adam, that's such an important issue. I just want to say on that one comment in particular, suggesting that Jewish Americans were disloyal if they didn't agree with his political views or they didn't agree with him. I mean, we really need to pause and realize how dangerous that is. That is suggesting disloyalty among people because they have a faith or because they have an ethnic background. That's been thrown at Jewish people for millennia, literally. And it's a really dangerous idea in a world where there's white supremacy rising up again. And again, Donald Trump's had a lot to do with that. So I hope this is one of the moments where folks across the board, and I do think a lot of people of conscience look at that and they say, wait a minute, that's now taking us to a very, very dangerous place. So we can't get numb to it. We can't get used to it. But in terms of how we fight back, as you're pointing out, the nominee of this party has to be able to take him on, not run after each tweet, but in fact point out the fundamental contradiction of Donald Trump. He won because he told working people he'd take care of them. He did the opposite. He lied to working people. He said, I'm going to be on your side. He gave the biggest tax giveaway to the wealthy and corporations in a generation. His cabinet's millionaires and billionaires. He hasn't done anything for working people in the final analysis. And the Democrat needs to be the one to point that out and just recognize this guy, he doesn't do so well when you actually confront him. He's used to being a bully, in my opinion, and I've watched him a long time in New York. He's used to getting people to cower. If you don't cower, if you're strong, if you're forceful, throws him off his game. And that's what I do as the Democratic nominee. And I want this whole country to be a country that puts working people first. But the Democratic Party has to stand for working people. And we haven't clearly enough for a while now. I believe with a message of working people first, with clear ideas about making the wealthy pay their fair share in taxes, putting money back in the hands of working people, that's how you beat Donald Trump. And pointing out that he just said he was going to do one thing and did the exact opposite.
You're one of the most progressive candidates in this race. What do you make of Bernie Sanders changing his Medicare for All plan to include some protections for union-negotiated health care benefits? It seems like once you open that up and give something to somebody, there's going to be a line in terms of people wanting more there.
Adam, I think where we all should go in terms of this discussion is to say, is the goal universal health care or not? I'm someone who believes in universal health care. I'm someone who believes that our ultimate goal, it won't happen overnight, should be a single-payer system, that we have great examples from around the world of that working much better for people, being more reliable, bringing down the cost of prescription drugs, making sure that people have a whole range of treatment. In America today, God help you if you have a mental health condition of any kind, which is 1 in 5 American adults, a lot of insurance doesn't cover it. You want dental, a lot of insurance doesn't cover it. You have a serious disease, your insurance runs out. There are so many things wrong with the current insurance system because it's based on private insurance, based on private companies and their needs. That's why people get hit time and time again with the premiums, the deductibles, the out-of-pocket expenses, the co-pays. When I talk to working people, when I talk to middle-class people, they say their insurance is barely sufficient, in a lot of cases just doesn't reach what they need. So I say a universal model. It'll take some time. I think union members have a right to say, prove to us that this new plan will be better before you transition us off of ours. That's right. We should go through that kind of transition. But I'll tell you one thing, for union members, unions have had to fight for health care for generations. If it was provided as part of a national vision, it's actually going to strengthen the hand of the labor movement to be able to focus on wages and working conditions and a lot of other things. So I say this is the right way to go. Let's agree that we need universal health care. Let's agree that Americans should have to ration their health care. And then we'll figure out how to make sense of things like those union plans that are worthy of respect, until we can show them we can do something even better.
What do you make of the State of Israel denying entry to Representatives Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar? They both support the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, BDS. You've been an outspoken opponent of BDS. What do you think about that decision?
So I support the State of Israel very strongly, and I oppose BDS with everything in me because I think it's actually trying to undermine the survival of Israel. And therefore, I'm a perfect person to say that what the government of Israel did was a huge mistake. You do not exclude elected members of the U.S. Congress from Israel and think that that's okay. It's not okay. That we are their closest ally. We are their lifeline. And I'm proud that America is that for Israel. And we have to keep being that. But you know what? When you start excluding people based on their political views, that's a very, very dangerous precedent. And as someone who opposes BDS intensely, I don't fear a debate over BDS. I don't fear that there are some members of Congress who might see things differently. Let's have that fight. Let's have that good, honest, democratic debate. But excluding people from a nation, that enters into a realm that's very dangerous in terms of democracy. I fundamentally oppose it. And I actually think the government of Israel should immediately reverse that decision.
All right, Mayor de Blasio, we thank you for your time on Close Up. Appreciate it.
Pleasure, Adam.